Chapter 1. A Glimpse Through Fractured Time. It started with a flicker, faint and almost imperceptible, like the flutter of a moth's wings caught in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was exhaustion playing tricks. After all, late nights in the lab tended to dissolve the boundaries between imagination and reality. But when the flicker returned, sharper and more deliberate, it demanded my attention. I hadn't meant to create it, you know. The device. It wasn't even the focus of my experiments. It was an accident, a byproduct of a failed attempt to measure the resonance of quantum particles. A metal contraption, half cobbled together with scrap components, blinked to life on my workbench. The first time I peered into it, what I saw nearly stopped my heart. My family's home, a sturdy brick house, the heart of my childhood, consumed in roaring flames. That vision lingered long after I shut the machine down. It felt real, too real, as though I'd witnessed a memory rather than a premonition. My hands trembled as I scribbled notes, trying to make sense of the unexplainable. Was it just a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation? A malfunction of the device? Or something else entirely? For days, I avoided testing it again. Cowardice, maybe. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It gnaws at the edges of resolve until you can no longer ignore its bite. When I turned the device back on, a new vision emerged, just as vivid as the first. The fire hadn't started yet, but my younger brother, his face pale with fear, stood in the front yard, yelling for help. The device shut itself off before I could see more. The implications were clear. This wasn't a fixed outcome. The future wasn't set in stone. It could be changed. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest. If I could prevent the fire, I could save them. Or so I thought. But the flickers grew worse after that. Each time I turned on the device, it revealed new futures, fractured, incomplete, and often contradictory. In one glimpse, I was there, pulling my brother out of the flames. In another, the house was untouched, but something worse loomed in the background. A gray, shapeless void swallowing the world I knew. I closed my journal that night, my head spinning with possibilities and dread. My mind raced with questions. If I could stop one disaster, would I create another? Was there truly a way to thread the needle, to carve a path where everyone made it out unscathed? The device sat on the bench, humming softly in the darkness. I watched it from across the room, its flickering light casting long shadows on the walls. Little did I know, that tiny machine would become the greatest burden I'd ever carry.
Chapter 2. Into the Maze of Futures. The hum of the device was faint but constant, like the whisper of static you could almost convince yourself wasn't there. I hadn't slept. How could I? The flickers on the machine's screen haunted me, fragments of futures where flames consumed everything, shadowy figures blurred into motion, and my brother screamed from the front yard. I told myself I was ready to face it, but the truth was, I was desperate. I had to save the house. I had to save them. But at what cost? The first trial was simple. I called my brother, warning him to keep an eye out for anything unusual. The machine flickered to life, showing a new vision. The fire was gone. Relief washed over me for a fleeting moment, until the next flicker emerged. The screen showed the aftermath of a car accident, and my brother wasn't among the survivors. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Changing the future wasn't as simple as swapping out one event for another. I tested again, and again, and again, calling my parents instead, warning neighbors, placing anonymous tips with the fire department. Each time, the device showed me something new. Alternate futures branching out like tangled threads, most of them unraveling into nightmares. One future showed the house intact, untouched by flame, but the neighborhood was barren, empty, silent as a graveyard. Another showed a celebration, laughter pouring out of the windows as guests toasted my brother's promotion. But I wasn't there. In that version, I was buried in the local cemetery. Every attempt felt like a labyrinth, every choice a door leading to a new hallway, twisting into impossibly complex paths. I'd find brief glimpses of beauty, yes, like my parents sitting by a sunlit garden, their faces calm and serene. But the darkness always followed. A version where I saved the house but lost myself. A version where my brother grew up alone. A version where everything burned anyway, no matter how hard I tried. It wasn't just the futures changing. I felt it creeping under my skin, pulling at the edges of my mind. The paranoia grew worse with each trial. The idea of causality, one choice rippling outward in infinite, unpredictable waves, had seemed abstract before. Now it felt personal. Now it felt cruel. I began to see patterns, faint but recurring. A knock at the door became a trigger in one future, while an unanswered phone call led to tragedy in another. Adjusting smaller variables seemed safer, but the device revealed their consequences nonetheless. A forgotten umbrella, a glance exchanged between strangers, even the tone of my voice in a single conversation. Everything mattered. Everything could unravel. It was beautiful in a way, the vast complexity of it all. But it was horrifying too, knowing the weight of each choice rested entirely in my hands. The machine didn't give me answers, only questions. Only possibilities. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the flickering screen. My chest felt tight, my vision blurred. There had to be a way, a thread I hadn't seen yet, a choice that could save the house without destroying everything else. I just needed to keep going. I needed to try harder. And yet, a gnawing thought lingered in the back of my mind. What if there was no best scenario? Chapter 3. The Weight of the Smallest Choice. The machine's flicker felt alive, taunting me with glimpses of futures just beyond my grasp. Days blurred into nights as I worked tirelessly, weaving through the maze of cause and effect. The initial thrill of possibility had faded, replaced by something heavier. Each choice carried consequences I couldn't predict, spreading outward like cracks in glass. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't control it. It didn't help that the smallest things seemed to matter now. I saw it in the device's flickers, clear as day. A missed appointment led to a burst water pipe in one timeline, while choosing coffee over tea rippled into a future where an unknown woman wept in the rain. I didn't know her, but the sight of her heartbreak stuck with me. And that was the worst part, how deeply it weighed on me. I wasn't just fixing futures for my family anymore. Somehow, I felt responsible for everyone. Paranoia crept in slowly, growing like a shadow that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the machine anymore. It was everything. A knock at the door felt too loud, as if it echoed across timelines. Conversations carried a heavier weight. Every word felt loaded with meaning, yet I could never know if they'd be the spark that unraveled everything. I second-guessed myself constantly, drowning in the what-ifs. My journal was a mess of scribbled timelines and frayed thoughts. Notes on experiments cluttered the pages, alongside fragments of futures I couldn't escape. In one version, I saved the house, but lost my brother to illness. In another, the fire never came, but my parents disappeared without explanation, leaving me with only echoes of their laughter. There was one future where everything seemed perfect. The house stood, my family was whole, and the air felt light with possibility. But the flicker lasted just a moment before fading. The machine refused to show it again, no matter how hard I tried to recreate the sequence that led to it. Was it even real? Had I imagined it? The thought gnawed at me, a bitter ache in the depths of my mind. With every trial, exhaustion weighed heavier. I barely recognized myself anymore. The person I used to be, optimistic, driven, full of curiosity, had given way to someone else entirely. Someone consumed by desperation and fear. Someone who believed, against all odds, that the perfect outcome was still possible if they just tried harder. But deep down, I knew the truth. The cracks I'd seen in the futures weren't just in the timelines. They were in me. And the longer I stared into the machine's flickers, the more I felt myself fracturing, splitting into versions I barely understood. As I sat staring at the device, its hum filling the silence, one question echoed through my mind. Was perfection even possible? Chapter 4. The Turning Point. The machine's flickering light had become a second heartbeat, ever-present and unrelenting. I was a shell of who I'd been, my thoughts splintered into 1,000 possible futures, each one demanding answers I couldn't give. I'd tried everything, every variable, every minute adjustment, every plea to the unfeeling screen of that cursed device. And still, no matter the path I chose, the fire loomed. It was during one of those endless nights, seated in the pale glow of the machine, that the realization hit me. It wasn't gentle or gradual. It crashed over me like a tidal wave, undeniable in its clarity. The fire wasn't the true cost. It was merely the symptom. The machine had been showing me all along that to save the house, I would have to give up something far greater. At first, I fought the thought. My mind rebelled against the very idea that the only way forward would involve sacrifice. There had to be another way, an option I hadn't seen yet. But the more I tested, the more the machine confirmed what I feared. A constant thread ran through the glimpses of futures where the house stood intact, where my family survived unscathed. I wasn't there. It wasn't always literal. I didn't always vanish from the picture. In some futures, I was alive, but changed beyond recognition. A recluse, a shadow, unanchored from the people and dreams that had once defined me. In others, I wasn't merely absent. I had sacrificed something crucial, my career, my connections, even my brother's trust. And the worst part? Each loss felt like a piece of myself being torn away, leaving behind a void I wasn't sure I could fill. The machine hummed quietly in the corner, as if mocking me with its simplicity. A mechanism of wires and circuits, capable of unraveling my very soul. I buried my head in my hands, my breaths shallow and ragged. How had I let it come to this? I thought about my family, their laughter, their arguments, the warmth of a home that had once been a sanctuary. Could I truly let it all burn because I wasn't brave enough to pay the price? And if I did choose to sacrifice, who would I become on the other side of it? Was it worth saving the house if, in doing so, I lost everything that made me who I was? The weight of the decision crushed me, but there was no running from it. I felt time slipping through my fingers, the consequences of my inaction closing in. Each glimpse of the fire seemed closer, more vivid, as if the universe itself was demanding an answer. The machine flickered again, revealing a fleeting vision of my brother. He stood in the yard, shouting my name, his face etched with desperation. For the first time, the answer became clear. The fire wasn't the only thing I had to stop. It was me. Tears streamed down my face as I reached for the machine one last time. The realization gutted me, but I couldn't let them suffer. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, I would pay it. I just hoped I could live with the person I became on the other side. Chapter 5. The Unchosen Paths. The machine fell silent as I flipped the final switch. The hum that had haunted me for weeks was gone, replaced by a suffocating stillness. And yet, at that moment, all I felt was relief. I had made my choice. There was no going back. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the darkened screen. The weight of what I'd done settled over me like a heavy cloak. The future I'd glimpsed, the one I'd fought so hard to shape, remained a mystery. I had no way of knowing if I'd succeeded. The machine was silent now, its secrets locked away, and for the first time, I was left with nothing but my own thoughts. The fire wouldn't come. That much I was certain of. The house would stand, my family would go on, and life would continue as it always had. But the cost? Oh, the cost. It was a thread that pulled at me with every breath, unraveling pieces of who I'd been. There were futures where I had walked away. Futures where I had let the fire burn because I couldn't bear to face the consequences of change. But that wasn't the path I'd chosen. I had sacrificed a part of myself, something intangible, yet irreplaceable. Was it my sense of control? My identity? My faith that life could ever truly be predictable? I didn't know. All I knew was that I was no longer the person I had been when this began. I rose from the chair, feeling the ache of exhaustion in every muscle. The lab was bathed in the soft light of dawn, and for the first time, I noticed the small details I had overlooked for weeks. The way the sun filtered through the blinds, the faint scent of coffee left in a forgotten mug. These were the moments I had neglected in my obsession with the machine. These were the moments I had almost lost. Perhaps that was the lesson all along, that control is an illusion, and the search for perfection is a trap. I had spent so much time chasing futures I could never fully grasp, only to realize that the present was slipping through my fingers. And now, with the machine silent and the path ahead uncertain, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace, exactly, but acceptance. There were paths I would never walk, lives I would never live, and choices I would never undo. I carried the weight of those unchosen futures with me, but I also carried the hope that they had led me to this moment, a moment where I could finally let go. I stepped out of the lab, the morning air cool against my skin. The world was quiet, still waking, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was waking with it. The fire wouldn't come. The house would stand. And though I might never know the full extent of what I had given up, I knew this. Some truths are better left unseen.